Hi, and welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. Today we're going to talk about Marguerite de Valois. She was Queen Mary at 6 days old. So there's a lot of little girls her age named after her, which is probably why they were all named Mary. But
Oh wow, I never thought about that.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah. There was, all the other nobles named their babies Mary around the same time after the 6-day-old queen, which is crazy that she was queen at 6 days old. But that's why she was living in France, because it was not safe in Scotland for a baby queen.
Yeah, yeah. Did she actually have the whole coronation or was there a regent
There was a regent,
that
yeah.
was okay?
They did have a coronation when she was about 2, and the crown couldn't be put on her head because it was too heavy for a 2-year-old. So they just had people like hold the crown over her head while she was coronated. But her mother was back in Scotland being regent, and she was being raised in France with her future in-laws and her betrothed, Prince Francois.
Wow. What I must imagine is when you're like practically raised with the person you're
Yeah,
supposed
like
to
a sibling.
marry, they're gonna be like a sibling
Yeah,
towards you. Like there's like been tons of like research done on
yeah,
that. The like
yeah.
unrelated, children who are raised together,
Mm-hmm.
they don't really form romantic feelings towards
No.
each other because
But it would also be
they
weird
feel like
because
family.
from the moment they met, when they were little, I think they were about 5 years old when they met. They were told that that's who they were going to marry. So it was just always understood that that was their husband. They just weren't old enough yet.
Wow. I
And it,
wonder if that was a reassuring feeling or
I
if
don't
that was a
know.
scary feeling.
In this case, she seemed to be very fond of him, and so maybe good, but we'll get into that. But that's a whole different. I can't.
Sorry.
It happens a lot. A lot of people in this story grow up with their future husbands, and it doesn't always work out great.
Wow. Oh.
When Marguerite's mother was told not to have any more babies, she was devastated. This was her one purpose in life. And her husband was spending all his free time with his mistress, so that probably stung. Like, she didn't have anyone to commiserate with,
Yeah.
even. Queen Catherine was very proud to have provided France with 7 royal children, and she decided to pour all of her attention into them. She became a helicopter parent in the most helicoptery of ways. Most of her time was spent with her older children. Francois and his betrothed Mary, Queen of Scots. See, this is why it's so long. She's not even 5 years old yet. Like, and we've already gone through a lot
That's
of
insane.
story. She's still like a toddler, basically, a preschooler. So
And
let's
she's
see.
like just surrounded. I think what's fascinating is that like she's interesting in and of herself, but she's also like coming from this legacy and
Yeah.
surrounded by
She's surrounded by
all of
people
these
you've heard of.
individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the Medicis, and Mary, Queen of Scots, was her future sister in law who grew up with her.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's just wild.
Yeah, I don't know why there's not more shows and movies about her. There should be all the shows and movies about her. She's very cool. So most of the Queen's time was spent with her older children, Francois and his betrothed, Mary, Queen of Scots. And Elizabeth and Claude would need profitable marriages soon. So that's where her focus was. And from there, Catherine's interest started to wane. She loved her children, but there was a lot of them, and there just wasn't enough time. She had to triage the situation.
Mm.
So little Marguerite was not really on her mom's radar. She was just a preschooler at the royal nursery. Less than 2 years after the death of her little sisters, there was a huge royal wedding. 14-year-old Prince Francois was getting married to 15-year-old Mary, Queen of Scots. So 5-year-old Marguerite, I imagine, was probably pretty excited. This was a big deal. She was going to be involved. Her brother was getting married. She was a
Yeah.
5-year-old princess.
And I bet in her eyes, it was like a fairy tale
Yeah.
playing out in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm gonna imagine that like she must have held some sort of affection for her brother, and then for Mary Queen of Scots, like was
Mm-hmm.
such a part of her life. Like
Yeah.
the idea of these two like people coming together and like that this was going to be the ultimate like happily ever after for
Yeah.
her.
Mary, Queen of Scots, had been at French court longer than Marguerite was even alive. So she'd been there her whole life.
Yeah.
And her brother was now going to be the 14-year-old king consort of Scotland, which was just more of the awkwardness from their childhood because Mary was a queen since she was 6 days old. Her husband, the prince, was a prince. She outranked him because she was a queen. So she walked ahead of the heir to the throne of France in France because she was already a queen.
I gotta say, I kind of love that.
Yeah.
Like, there's very few moments in history I feel like that women get to win.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not that I'm like all about like,
yeah.
You know.
I mean, it makes sense. If she was an
women...
adult queen at court, she would definitely outrank the royal children. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
But as soon as he became king, then he outranked her in France and she outranked him in Scotland. Because he would be the king and she'd be the consort in France and vice versa in Scotland.
I wonder if they would argue over where they spent their time.
No,
just because
they both liked France. They both liked France. Mary grew up at France. She was Scottish, but she was basically French.
Got it.
And this was a major royal celebration. And the princess would have been included in it. And the royal couple stayed in France. So she didn't have to say goodbye to her brother. She didn't have to say goodbye to Mary, Queen of Scots. They stayed in France. They had their own residence now. They weren't in the royal nursery with the children. But they were around. And Mary's mother was in Scotland, being the regent still, trying to keep Scotland out of the hands of the Presbyterians. It's a whole John Knox thing. She was fighting the Presbyterians because she was very Catholic. And you can hear that in Mary, Queen of Scots episode, or in her mother, Marie de Guise episode. She also has an episode where we talk about John Knox and his hatred of women. A fun addition to our spiderweb, because everyone's related, Marguerite's Aunt Madeline had been married to the King of Scots for a summer. Mary, Queen of Scots' father, before she had died. And she also has an episode, Marguerite of Valois, the Summer Queen of Scots. So, if you're not following that, Marguerite's aunt had been married to Mary, Queen of Scots' father before he married Mary, Queen of Scots' mother.
What happened to her aunt? She died? Is that what you said?
She had tuberculosis, and she could not move from the warm Loire Valley to the rainy, dismal Scotland. She was only queen for the summer, and then she passed.
Oh.
And then he was like, let's get another French wife, and that's when he found Mary, Queen of Scots' mother, who knew his first wife. They were childhood friends, because everyone's related.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's definitely a tangled spider web. So
it's like a spaghetti noodle pile.
Yeah. So back to 5-year-old Marguerite, because she's still only 5. We aren't moving quickly through her life. Her brother had just had a giant wedding, and just 9 months later, there was another royal wedding. 11-year-old Princess Claude was marrying 16-year-old Charles, Duke of Lorraine. He had been the Duke since he was 2 years old, so don't love that age difference. I don't love 11-year-olds getting married at all, or 16-year-olds getting married at all, for that matter. They're both much too young. But this was a whole alliance thing. And even in that time, 11 was not old enough to get married. 12 was when you could agree to get married, so in today's terms, it would be like if a 17-year-old got married. It's kind of how they would see it. Even though she's 11.
So was that a little bit of a scandal where people like, oh my.
It was one of those like, well, it's not allowed, but they do need the alliance, so let's just do the paperwork, and we're just assuming they won't have sex for a decade. But she is going to live with him in Lorraine. She's leaving home at 11.
Oh.
This wasn't like Lucrezia, because Lucrezia got married early. But she wasn't allowed to leave home until she was old enough to be married.
Right.
Princess Claude was going to live in Lorraine as the Duchess of Lorraine.
I just can't, because I literally teach 11-year-olds.
Yeah. And Claude and Charles had grown up together. Charles had been raised at the French court as a hostage. So, his
Oh.
So Lorraine would behave. Like, we have your Duke. So, for my Game of Thrones fans out there, if anyone's seen Game of Thrones, it would be like if Theon Greyjoy married Sansa Stark and then they were sent back to the Iron Islands to rule. So that's my metaphor for anyone who's seen Game of Thrones. Or in this case, Lorraine. They were being sent back to Lorraine. And she would have been an 11-year-old spy, sort of. She would have been expected to let her family know if anything shady was going on in Lorraine.
Was that an open secret? Did the other family kind of assume?
Everyone would have
That,
assumed, but yeah, you wouldn't say anything. Like, of course not. No, I'm loyal to you. But yeah, that's kind of how it worked back then. You could assume that she'd probably be telling her mother things.
Right. Was
And
her, like, I wonder if, like, her letters were read.
probably,
And, like,
she would probably have to write it in like a coded kind of. That's a lot of pressure to put on an 11-year-old.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, to be like, hey,
Yeah.
by the way, you gotta leave home. You've just managed to get to double digits.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, you have to figure out all of their state secrets and
Yeah.
send it back to us, but don't let them figure it
Yeah.
out because they'll probably kill you or throw you in a dungeon
Exactly.
somewhere. Best of luck. Bye.
I wrote in my notes, if you ever feel like a bad parent, just remember Princess Claude was married and sent away at 11. So,
You know, that does make me feel better.
yeah. And Catherine de Medici, she was obsessed with her children, but she did seem to see her daughters more as alliance tools, whereas her sons she fawned over.
You know, I'm going to be generous and I'm not going to fault her for that because
She has a lot
I
of
believe
trauma.
that she what?
She has a lot of trauma.
She has a lot of trauma, but more than that, I think that's a product of the time.
Oh, for
I
sure.
think that was just how things were done.
She was in an alliance
And-
marriage. She didn't know her husband before she was just sent off
Right.
as a child to marry him.
Right. So I don't think she did it out of like being cool. I think it was just that was what was done. It's like,
Catherine Medici strikes me as kind of an old soul. She knew what her job was going in, and she was more mature than she should have been at the young age when she got married. So I think she just assumed like her daughters, if they weren't at that place, they needed to get it together. But they had very different childhoods. She was an orphan at like a week old. It was like 6 days. Both her parents had died. And she grew up in convents with nuns while it's in Steph's episode. It's a whole thing. But when she was a child in the nunnery, the city she was at was under siege, and everyone had decided that it was because of her, and they said they could kill her and just throw her out to the army, and then the army would go away, or they could just hang her naked over the wall and just let her be raped. And she's like 11 at that point. So to her, sending her 11-year-old to
Toledo.
Lorraine to be the Duchess is like easy.
yeah.
Like, you're not under siege, imprisoned in a convent, being threatened by an entire city of Florence.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So, yeah, she would have definitely thought her children had a privileged, cushy, easy life. But it sounds crazy to us now. Like, I can't even imagine at 11. And this would be a very different feeling for Princess Marguerite than when her brother had married. He had stayed in France as their future king, but Claude, now a duchess, was moving to Lorraine, which wasn't crazy far, but it was far enough that she probably wasn't going to see her for years at least.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't really time to get used to that new normal. Beyond the fact that this was normal and expected for the time, no one would have spent much time explaining this to the 6-year-old princess. Because it's just the way it was. Nobody would have even thought this would have been jarring for her. And just 5 months after the wedding of Claude, her sister Elizabeth was getting married. So they were doing it all over again.
Whoa.
So another
She
wedding.
She must be feeling like all of her like family is just getting slowly stripped away.
Yeah, because she lived in the royal nursery with her sisters. Her brothers had a different royal nursery. So it was her and her two sisters, and for a little while, probably it had been the 5 Marys. And Francois got married, so all the Marys would have moved in with Mary and Francois. And then her sister Claude got married, so she'd be gone. So then it was just her and her sister Elizabeth. And now Elizabeth was getting married. And Marguerite is only 6 years old at this point, and she's just done 3 weddings in 14 months.
Oh.
And it was just going super fast paced. And yeah, no one was sitting down explaining to her, like, I know this is going to be hard. All your sisters are going to be gone really quickly. So 13-year-old Princess Elizabeth was getting married to the twice widowed 32-year-old King of Spain.
Ew.
Yeah.
Ew. Like all capital letters, ew.
He was a 32-year-old single father who'd already been married twice and lost both his wives. And she was a 13-year-old princess who up until now had lived with her little sisters. I just wrote gross.
This is not going to go well.
No. Originally, she was supposed to marry his son Carlos, who at the time was 14, so they were close in age. But then, if you've heard of Bloody Mary, Queen Mary I of England, she had been King Philip's second wife, and she died. So King Philip needed a new wife, and he was like, oh, we can find a new wife for my son. I'll just marry her. She's already been vetted and everything. So gross.
That's so messed
and
up.
She was being sent off to have the same job as her sister, but even more intense because she was doing it with the country of Spain. She was expected to send the intrigue back to her parents at 13.
And I'm not gonna, I can't imagine that this much older man was going to be understanding of, the fear and uncertainty and loneliness and sadness.
I mean, he probably would have said that he would be, but yeah, no. He's the king of Spain. He's got stuff on his plate and...
Well, and he's going to be, and maybe I'm being, stereotypical, but I feel like it's not really. But, I mean, men of this time have a very, clear expectation of women of this time.
Yes.
And
it did help that he already had children. So he already had an heir. So there wouldn't necessarily be a hurry. But it was in his prerogative to do whatever he wanted. They were married. He could expect sex multiple times a day if he wanted.
And see, that just hurts my heart so much.
It was seen during the time as polite husbands, well-behaved husbands, good, who you would consider a good husband, would wait until their wives were full grown or close to full grown to have babies, 16, 17 years old, because their bodies just, if they got pregnant at 11, 12, 13, you were risking their life and the baby's life. They may never have kids again. So it was seen as a polite thing to do, to wait until your wife was 16 or 17 to get her pregnant. But there was no rules about it. It was just that's just what civilized people do. And then nobody knows what happens behind closed doors.
Right.
Yeah. That's how I don't love it. I get very uncomfortable when I have to talk about how young these people are when they get married. Now, royal weddings back then were huge events, huger than they are now. Royal weddings now are a big deal. Royal weddings back then lasted weeks. So, and the more royal the wedding, the bigger it was. And this was a king marrying a princess who was becoming the Queen of Spain. So this was a big to-do. And there was even tournament days where they would celebrate by just having a tournament party. And 2.5 weeks after Elizabeth's wedding, the party was still going strong. So that's how long we're 2.5 weeks after the wedding. It's 17 days. And they were having a celebratory jousting match. I almost read that as celebrity jousting match. Which was also probably true because they're all kings and princes and,
Right. I think it's an apt Freudian slip.
Mm-hmm. So there was some debate about whether the King of France should participate. He really wanted to because this was his thing. He was very good at jousting. He always had been. He was very athletic. He was into it. But he was also 40, so he was aging out. They were like, is this something you should be doing at 40? Because 40 is the new 60, or 60 is the new 40. So 40 was much older then than it is now. And most people were like, you're the king of France and you're 40. Absolutely do not do this. And the most outspoken was Marguerite's mother, Catherine. She was like, no, absolutely not. This is not a good idea. This is a terrible idea. She basically forbid him to joust. She had a powerful man at court named Nostradamus. Nostradamus had predicted that this king would die in his 40th year in battle.
Oh,
so
no.
we have to put aside the fact that he was 40, put him already in his 41st year. And the fact that jousting isn't battle, it's mock battle at best. But the queen took Nostradamus very seriously. He knew things. She knew that he knew things. And he was like, your husband's going to die in his 40th year in battle. And she was like, do not joust. King Henri was urged on by his mistress, Diane de Poitiers, to joust. She was about 60 at this point, and she was like, you should do it. You're super hot when you joust. I don't know how that went, but I assume that's how it went.
It sounds right.
I've told this story a couple times because we've gone through this period in history in various episodes. But the short version is that there was an accident, and a lance tip hit and broke off in the king's face. One of the lance fragments went so deep into the king's eye that it had entered his brain. So this was a fatal wound. Even though they thought it was maybe just a facial wound at first, this was always going to be a fatal wound because there was a splinter in his brain. And they don't have antibiotics, so it's going to get infected. And he developed a brain infection and he died. And this only convinced his wife more that Nostradamus knew things. She was like, oh my gosh, he predicted it. Nostradamus knows everything.
This is the Nostradamus.
Yes, the Nostradamus. He lives at French court with Catherine de Medici.
Wow.
And he predicted the king's death. Although, I mean, like I said, I would argue he was in his 41st year because he was already 40. And Nostradamus had said in his 40th year in battle, 41st year in jousting, that's close. It's definitely closer than I'm comfortable with.
Right. Like, I'm like, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know if I want to, like, argue the details on that one.
It's like kind of true. It's just technically slightly not.
But that's closer than comfortable.
Yeah. Nostradamus pretty much nailed it. And Queen Catherine was like, this is why I keep this guy around. He knows, he could say anything about anyone at this point. She would think it was fact. He could see the future.
I mean, I would be like, yep.
Yeah.
I'd be right there with her.
I wouldn't
100%.
be doubting him as much. I'd be like, well, let's maybe think about this. Why risk it? And you have to kind of go with, like, genie rules, right? Like, you don't want to make a wish to a genie and then have them mistake what you said and then you get the wrong, like, you have to do that with Nostradamus. Like, if it could be close to true, maybe he knows something.
Right. It's not worth it.
Right? But it's also odds. Like, a king in his 40s who goes to war easily could die. And he could just say that because since I told you not to go to war, then you didn't go to war when you were 40, I saved your life.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough.
But this is close. This is, I think, one of Nostradamus' most spot-on predictions.
Yeah. Although, I gotta say, like, I'm wondering the motivation of What's-Her-Face to egg him on.
I think she just...
What did she get
I get the feeling that she liked that the queen was like, I forbid you to do it. And she could be like, but it'd be cool if you did. And then he did. Because, sorry, I hit my mic.
Yeah, to be the winner.
Mm-hmm. And remember when the first time when he was 13, when he wore her colors at a jousting match? It was probably nostalgic. Like, this is so gross. But to her, he was still that 13-year-old boy wearing her colors. Because he did. He wore her colors all the time. Her colors were black and white. And if you ever see a picture, if you look up King Henri II of France, I almost guarantee you he's going to be in black and white. Because those were Diane's colors.
Wow. That's wild to me.
So I think she was being nostalgic and like, oh, this is like our meet cute, except not so much. But to her, maybe it was.
Do you? What I'm assuming there was not good vibes between her and the queen.
No, but she had all the power, so the queen had no leverage.
Right.
But yeah, the king is now dying of a brain infection, so Diana won't be around very long.
She's now questioning all of her life choices in
she's
the
like,
amount of times that she pissed off Catherine.
Yeah.
She's like, OSHIT.
Yeah.
How do I make lemonade out of this lemon?
I have in my notes that she was probably regretting choices she had made when she encouraged him to joust. Like, oh, well, I'm the architect of my own demise. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't tell me, because it's just human nature, that she wouldn't have been a little bit proud and a little bit snooty and a little bit of a B-I-T-C-H.
Yeah, she had the king wrapped around her finger. The king was going to do anything she said.
Right. And so, I mean, you would have to have, like, a conscience of, like, Jesus to not take advantage of that.
Yeah. And Marguerite's sister was sent off to be Queen of Spain. Like, her dad is fatally injured, potentially dying. I mean, for sure dying, but they thought potentially dying. And they were like, okay, well, bye. Go be Queen of Spain, 13-year-old.
Oh, gosh.
Which is better than her sister's 11, but this is also way more pressure. And, yeah, not much at all. Her mother sat by her father's bedside as he slowly died from his brain infection. At first it was thought that he was just healing, but then slowly he was working, like in his bed, he was still kinging it up, and then slowly he lost the ability to speak, and then he was just moaning in agony. It was a terrible death. And Marguerite would have had nannies, so she would have been taken care of on the basic level. She had food. Someone was putting her in bed and bathing her. But she was likely forgotten during this time. Again, no one was going to explain to her that all her sisters were gone. And her dad was now dead. Her little sisters had died. She might not remember. She was 3 when her little sisters had died. But basically, all her life that she could remember was chaotic. And there would have been no therapy for this 6-year-old to kind of process this in.
I don't know. In my fairy tale brain, I am manufacturing some very kind-hearted nanny who, like, was like, this is what's happening.
Yeah,
and like
a mother figure.
Know, because that's...
Yeah. Exactly. Like this nanny that was just like, oh, this poor little girl. To be fair, she was the only girl left in the nursery once her sister got sent away to Spain. So all of the nannies that were there would have been focusing on her. So there is that. But she's by herself with the nannies.
But, you know, on the other hand, like, I wonder if she really didn't have any sort of close relationship with her parents because of the fact that she was so little and they were involved with all the other people and the running. Well, like, maybe it was like they were just
she was closer to her father, which is unfortunate because he's the one that died.
Dang it all.
She wrote in her memoirs that she has memories of sitting on her father's lap and telling him about the boys at court that she had crushes on, and he was listening. And she said that she liked the Marquis de Beaupre better than the other one. And the other one would be a young Duke of Guise, which will become relevant later. But she didn't like the Duke of Guise as much because the Marquis de Beaupre was better behaved. The Duke of Guise was naughty, and she was like, I don't like him as much. But that's also, so funny. It's possible that this was her father trying to figure out who she would marry when she was older, because these were all boys her age that would have been appropriate spouses at a later date.
Thanks for listening.